Good afternoon. Call this meeting to order. We're going to have two meetings this afternoon. This first one is a work session. Then we'll have our regular Urban Renewal Authority meeting at 5 o'clock where we'll do all the formalities. And so we'll just jump into a work session. Ryan, you want to lead us off here?
Actually, we'll have Cindy call roll real quick, just for the work session.
Okay.
Councilmember Dennehy. Absent. Councilmember Grantham. Absent. Councilmember Hamrick.
Here.
Councilmember Maloney.
Here.
Councilmember Reeser.
Here.
Councilmember Schmischer.
Here.
Councilmember Stein.
Here.
Councilmember Tracy. Absent. Councilmember Troutman.
Here.
Councilmember Worthington.
Here.
Chairman Payne.
Here. Thanks, Ryan, for doing my job for me there.
That's all right, thank you, sir. And we will have Rick go ahead and get us kicked off here.
Yeah, thanks for being here, everyone. This is kind of a big day for the Urban Renewal Authority and 4 Mile Ranch. Back in 2022, I think it was, Byron Elliott came to me, and most of you have met him, he's at the end of the table, expressed an interest in acquiring the 4 Mile Ranch property and planned development, asked what we were interested in seeing for development, asked about the history of the development, and we got into several months of research into how this was all created and what loose ends were hanging out there and how did it get where it is now, and what do we need to do to bring it to something that we as a community want for the development. It's called out in our comprehensive plan as our planned growth area, and pretty critical to our growth as a community, especially if we want to get off of the habit, or not the habit, but the necessity of going to taxpayers for tax increases, because the growth we need in the community is going to be out there. So through our discussions, conversations, we brought Travis Payne into these conversations, Leo Evans, and really it's a project that needs the assistance of an urban renewal authority of tax increment financing to happen. It's the traditional but-for argument for urban renewal is that but for the existence of tax increment, this property will not be developed, at least not in a manner that will help us as a community grow and get the type of growth we need as a community. Just being involved with it from an economic development perspective gives us an advantage over other communities because we can actually help guide how we want the growth to go in this community, such as housing. So the but-for argument was a big one, and we began early on talking about the creation of a new urban renewal area. This would be a project-specific urban renewal area, which is really why urban renewal was created in the first place. Our current area is much more of a broader existing development area that has infrastructure, that has buildings, that has risks that the property out at 4 Mile simply doesn't have because it's vacant. So the idea is urban renewal takes vacant, blighted land and converts it into developable property and future development. So we are here today to talk about a potential 4 Mile Ranch area as part of the due diligence, and they've done a ton of due diligence. It's very impressive what they've done. We had meetings with the larger taxing entities, preliminary meetings with the larger taxing entities to get their feedback, what they may be interested in seeing, sharing the potential cost of this project, and really just gain insights from them on some of their concerns for this development. And that is leading us now into this meeting. This meeting is really a discussion about that plan and the urban renewal area, and ultimately asking for permission to begin the negotiation period with the taxing entities. So this would be the formal kickoff of creating a new urban renewal area, and we would enter into a 120-day agreement or 120-day period where we negotiate with the taxing entities for share-back negotiations. So for that, I believe we have Andy on here. Andy Arnold is the consultant for 4 Mile Ranch. We have Byron Elliott, of course, and then Jonathan Sims, many of you know as well, representing 4 Mile. And I will hand it over to Andy.
All right, Rick, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, well, first of all, thank you all for letting us present at this meeting. We have a lot of information to cover, and I do have a PowerPoint that I'll be bringing up in a second. I want to apologize that I'm not there in person. I was planning on it, but this snowstorm hit, and I'm calling you from Durango, Colorado, and Wolf Creek's going to get 2 feet of snow, so that's why I'm sitting in my office instead of there in Canyon City right now. But hopefully we can make the most of this Zoom call, and as Rick just mentioned, Jonathan's in the room representing the development team, and so if you have questions, we'll be able to answer them between the two of us. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. All right, and hopefully everybody is seeing.
We do. We have it.
All right, great. Thanks, Rick. All right, so just as a quick background, like Rick said, we're going to be discussing a lot of information today. We're going to be talking about the 4 Mile Urban Renewal Plan area, but to really walk into that 4 Mile Urban Renewal Plan area and the reason why we're in front of this board today is to discuss the development concept, the development vision, to unpack what we call in urban renewal terms the but-for argument, which is there is a financial roadblock to moving this project forward in the form of public infrastructure, and we need to come up with public financing solutions to overcome that roadblock so that this development can be realized. And one of those solutions is urban renewal, and figuring out the proper balance of revenue sharing agreements is really the purpose of this meeting today. And so going into our agenda, we're going to walk through that development concept. We're going to talk about the public infrastructure cost challenges surrounding that concept, the public financing strategies that this team, as well as Ryan and Rick and so many members of the city and other special districts have talked about over the last 2 years and probably longer, and then get into this urban renewal plan. There's 2 required documents that we're going to discuss, the condition survey and the impact report, those findings. And then we'll get into the next steps, which are the TIF revenue sharing agreements and why it's essential to start moving into that revenue sharing agreement period, what that period is, what we talk about over those 120 days, and how we're trying to balance project feasibility with making sure there are no negative or adverse impacts to the taxing entities supporting this project. So I'm going to start talking about the development program, then I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Jonathan. I just want to highlight the fact that 4 Mile has already been in a planning process for the past couple years. This development team has worked with the city to update what we call the Planned Development Plan, or the PD plan, and essentially that has changed the zoning of the area, the densities and intensities of residential and commercial uses, so that it has increased the flexibility to allow this development to proceed in a way that we think is going to be feasible with the market. And although that PD covers a much larger area, what I'm showing you are the proposed urban renewal plan boundaries, which I would say is only about 2/3 of the 4 Mile Ranch area. And the reason we are looking at that area and projecting development within that area is because we believe this is where development can realistically occur over the next 10 to 15 years. And that's really our window, our perspective on how long this is going to take and what development can happen. So that's our focus area. And we have projected this, and this is in your impact report, but just to reiterate, this conceptual development assumes very conservative absorption schedules. So while these numbers may seem large, keep in mind this is over a 10 to 15 year period. And we're imagining that there could be at least 689 new residential units in the area, not including the 142 units within the old plan area. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But that would include single-family detached housing, single-family attached housing, townhomes, multifamily. And while it's still conceptual, we're talking about an array of housing types that could include affordable housing as well. Then you have 550,000 square feet of commercial space. That again sounds like a very big number, but believe it or not, that's about the 10-year absorption average for Canyon City in terms of commercial square footage. So new retail, restaurants, potentially big box stores, office space, medical offices, professional services, business parks, all of that's possible in the 4-mile area. The conceptual development would extend new roads and trails, improve stormwater drainage facilities, extend central services for water and sewer lines, including the water tank. And what we're estimating is that this conceptual development that Jonathan will walk you through in just a moment could be upwards of $535 million in market value, so the value of all of the assets. And from a taxable standpoint, it could be up to $62 million in taxable value. There's a lot of community and economic benefits, as I'm sure Rick has told this whole board, what happens when we have a master plan development like this in a community. Well, in addition to the tax base, there could be almost 1,400 new permanent residents, 128 new students. There's also those indirect and induced benefits when you have that many new residents and as part of your community, they're going to be spending money not just in 4 Mile, but throughout Canyon City. That'll be generating sales tax for the rest of the city, for also the county. And then there's going to be jobs that are going to come of this. That's increased revenue also for workforce housing development in and around 4 Mile, and increased revenue for trails and transit improvements throughout the city and the county. With that, Jonathan, I'm going to turn it over to you. He's going to walk you through 7 phases of this conceptual development so that you can have an illustration around what we're talking about when we throw these numbers out and come back to the infrastructure costs and the impacts.
Thank you for that. It sounds like you can hear me okay. Jonathan Sims, owner's representative, 4 Mile Ranch. We've got a lot to cover in the next 50 minutes, so I'm going to go pretty quick. This first slide shows an overall collection of anticipated new infrastructure phases. This is not inclusive of the entire 4 Mile Ranch PD, but focused solely on the urban renewal areas. These are preliminary, and we will continue to develop each phase, but wanted to show you what we have in mind. Next slide. This first phase is low cost, high impact, and within the current C-Care URA. You'll recall that the current URA stretches to the east across 4 Mile Ranch, and it extends north of Charles Bronson Boulevard, formerly County Road 123. We understand this was strategic to include multifamily residential to support the adjacent commercial parcel developments. This phase would utilize some current TIF funds to support this small additional roadway. It's in green in the middle of this slide. It's a little hard to see. And minimal utilities extensions. I do want to emphasize that the final builds, what actually gets built on these parcels, is flexible. We are going to dial in to provide the most appropriate housing mix for the community, and that does include workforce housing. Next slide. This second phase is the widening of Charles Bronson Boulevard, as we need to add a turn lane to support the safe and efficient access to the commercial parcels. This phase would utilize the proposed new URA funds in conjunction with our Metro District's bonding capacities to support the costs associated with these roadway improvements. Next slide.
Jonathan, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Andy, would it be possible to maybe zoom in a little bit? I think it's hard to read it even at this scale, so I'm worried that folks online also may not be able to see the text, and I know a lot of work has gone into this. I think that's
Is that any better?
A little bit better. I don't know if it's possible,
Okay.
Brandon, on our end to make it any bigger. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that. Let's see. So next slide, please, Andy. This phase is also within the proposed new URA and is solely for new residential. Minimal new roadways and utilities are needed to provide a range of new housing opportunities. Oh, that's a little bit better. Thank you. Next slide. This phase, also within the proposed new URA, would activate the PD's multifamily core and a parcel that has long been earmarked for senior living. Again, I want to emphasize these layouts are flexible. We will dial in further to provide the community and the market the appropriate mix of housing opportunities. Next slide. This phase extends up to the future golf course facilities. The golf course is an incredible amenity and has a tremendous reputation. We are excited to enhance this amenity for the city, and attract more business, more tax revenue, and these new amenities will go a long way to energize and enhance the PD and the city. Next slide. Before we build any further, we may need to install an additional water tank. This is not necessarily needed for additional water volume, but more for maintaining appropriate water pressures within the PD. This has been earmarked for quite some time and already has an easement established within the property for its construction and access. Next slide. In order for continued commercial development, including to build out the village center, we will need to improve adjacent roadways and provide an outlet road over to 4 Mile Lane. Next slide. You can see here is this is the collection. This is a strategic linear approach to building the horizontal infrastructure necessary to move the PD forward. Happy to answer any questions anytime. Thank you. And Andy, if you want to go ahead.
All right. Well, Jonathan, thank you for walking through the phases of the development. Also, I think that those renderings and that illustration helps us wrap our heads around some of those numbers, right? The 680 units, the 550,000 square feet of commercial space. You get to see it laid out in that area. And you can see, if we go back to just phase 7, there's still a significant amount of area that's not developed, right? So those areas are going to be dedicated to hiking and biking trails. And then there's an additional area beyond what we're talking about with this URA that could be additional development in the next 15, 20, 25 years. But since we're focusing on this urban renewal plan, the reason why this urban renewal plan is essential is because, as we'll get into the condition survey, a majority of this area does not have infrastructure. And to activate it properly, we have to put in that public infrastructure, the roads, the water, the sewer. And so we asked engineering companies to come in and do some cost estimates on these various phases. And what you have on the screen right now is a table taking us through phases 1 through 7 that Jonathan just walked through, and the estimated infrastructure costs for each of those phases. And if we look at it in present dollars today, and granted, these phases are in the future, so you can imagine that today's dollars would only grow. But if we just take the present value of what those infrastructure costs are, we're between 55 and $56 million. And so I want to stress the fact that one of the things holding back 4 Mile is not necessarily that the market can't support new housing development and commercial development. It's that the market can't support housing and commercial development if that developer also has to fund the public infrastructure to go into it, because then at that point, to make that return on investment, the houses cannot be sold at a price point that would justify it, and the commercial leases cannot be leased out at a price point that can justify it. And so we have to look at these challenges and how do we overcome this public financing, this public funding, infrastructure funding challenge. And again, this is just to reiterate, what is this public infrastructure? If we go to this table, this is laid out in each phase what these numbers add up to. It's new roadways in phase 1, utility extensions and trail networks. In phase 2, it's Charles Bronson Boulevard upgrades, formerly County Road 123. New roadways in phases 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, connecting all of 4 Mile Parkway to 4 Mile Lane and creating that circulation throughout the area, in addition to all of the internal road networks throughout the area. The water tank in phase 6, and so on and so forth. And when you add up all of those infrastructure costs, that's really what's holding this project back, is trying to figure out ways to fund these new roads, water, and sewer improvements so that you can activate the land. And so what we're talking about today is, how do we come up with a public financing strategy that can overcome those costs? And I think the important thing to think about is really what we're asking ourselves is, how do we make this project feasible? And to understand feasibility, we have to first assess what those costs are. We just did that. Assess the development costs. What are the public infrastructure costs? Around $55 to $56 million. Then evaluate the development. What is its taxable value? In the impact report, we've forecasted that based upon this conceptual development. We understand it's about $62 million taxable value. The next step is to estimate those taxes. If this development were to exist, how much tax revenue would it generate? Property taxes, sales taxes, so forth. And once we know what those future tax revenue streams look like, can we leverage them in a way to come up with a public finance strategy to fund those initial infrastructure costs? And then finally, the other piece of feasibility that's critical is what are the impacts to our taxing partners? What is the impact to Canyon City, Fremont County, the school district, the fire district, all of the special districts, and trying to find a balance where this project can move forward without negatively impacting those entities. And that's feasibility. And that's what we're really after in all of this. The first step in feasibility, though, is closing that gap. So if you think about this, we're in Colorado and we're all in the mountains. So these are two mountains that we got to climb. On the left side, you can think of this as our public infrastructure mountain, and it's about $55 to $56 million. On the right side is our public financing sources, which we need to be equal to that public infrastructure mountain. Unfortunately, if we use some traditional tools like metro districts, add-on public improvement fees, potentially even fee waivers, we're not quite going to have the sources that can match the uses. So there's this funding gap. And so just to reiterate what these public finance strategies are, and I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but this is critically important because it shows you what the 4 Mile development team is trying to do on their end before even coming to an urban renewal solution or strategy. First are the metropolitan districts. These are districts that essentially self-tax the development that are imposed by the developer within the 4 Mile area that can issue debt in the form of bonds to fund public infrastructure. Metro districts can only fund public infrastructure. They can't issue debt for vertical construction. They can't issue debt that says goes into the pocket of the developer. It has to be for road, water, and sewer, and that's statute. Public improvement fees are an additional fee. It's almost like an additional sales tax that the developer can also impose on commercial development to collect that money. And then the third strategy is what we're here to talk about today, that urban renewal plan, which can leverage tax increment financing. If you can draft a tax increment financing sharing agreement with our partners, that future tax revenue could be utilized to be shared with the metro districts to increase the bonding capacity. It increases how much we have available to fund the infrastructure. And so just to go through where we're at with those various strategies, the 4 Mile team is updating their service plan currently for their metro districts. They're making the area contiguous with the 4 Mile Ranch property. The goal is to issue bonds for the public infrastructure within their metropolitan districts, and that will impose an additional property tax on property within the boundary, not within the city or the county, just within the boundary of their metro districts. And that new property tax levy on residential and commercial property will be used to basically pay for the debt that funds the infrastructure, the roads, the water, and the sewer. And the PIF acts in a similar way. That's an add-on sales and lodging tax PIF. It's not taking any money that would be generated by new commercial development or new sales. It's a self-imposed tax by the developer, and that can also be pledged to the metro district to help fund the infrastructure. So those are the things that the developer has looked at already. And where we're at right now is that if we estimate the conceptual development's metro district bonding capacity and what it can generate with the PIF, it's only about $26 million of bonding capacity. And you recall that our infrastructure costs are almost $56 million. So we still have about a $30 million funding gap to make this project work, even when we've exercised the tools that are essentially at the developer's disposal.
Andy,
So how do we? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Could I ask how and is this okay, since it's a work session?
Yeah, no, please do, because I had questions too, so.
Awesome. Could I ask how you came up with the 1% on the PIF bonding capacity? Is that just what you think that the market will bear?
Yes, exactly. That's what we think the market will bear. You could do a PIF. I've seen PIFs as high as 3%. But again, it's like you can only tax so much before you're not going to be able to attract tenants into that area. And sometimes even a 1% PIF is a big lift. But we wanted to forecast it just to see where we were at from a feasibility standpoint.
And then same thing with the metro district bonding. I mean, I know that there are already, pretty significant lifts in terms of metro taxes that are out there. Is the 15 million like the additional that you think the market can bear from a housing perspective, or?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. We want to be conservative with it. I believe what we forecasted is conservative millage rate increases, but just to be very clear, this service plan would have to go before city council to be approved, the Metro District updated service plan. And what we're talking about are not, this would not impact property. So if anybody's listening that's already in 4 Mile and is already in one of these metro districts, Metropolitan District 1 is not being touched by this plan. This is a URA discussion, so I don't want to get into that too much. We're talking about all the undeveloped areas of 4 Mile and anticipating what the market can bear in terms of a tax burden and what that can generate to fund the infrastructure to activate that undeveloped area.
Thank you, and thanks for that clarification about Metro District 1. Really helpful.
So a question I have,
Yeah.
a couple questions, is you're doing a self-imposed sales tax. How's that possible without voter approval?
Well, that's why they call it a fee. You know, it's a public improvement fee. And I am not an attorney, so I'll leave that to the legal minds to better explain it. But the way I understand it is that it walks like a tax, talks like a tax, but it's not a tax. So therefore, it's not subject to Tabor. It's a fee that is collected and then remitted to the Metropolitan District for the infrastructure. And that fee is only imposed on commercial development that occurs within the boundaries of the Metro District.
Okay, so, and then the Metro District would have to be approved by City Council, and then the Metro District can impose additional property taxes, again, without voter approval.
The Metro District can impose property taxes because it has a board, and that board is the development team. But the consolidated service plan would have to be approved, if it's going to be amended, would have to be approved by City Council. If City Council elects not to amend or not to approve the consolidated service plan that's being amended for this project, it would just increase the project's gap because we would have to use the existing metro districts that are out there already.
Okay, so if they don't approve the Metro District, then that's a dead end. Is that correct?
I wouldn't call it a dead end. It just means that the burden would shift more towards this other strategy that we're going to be unpacking, which is the urban renewal strategy.
Okay, well, let's move on.
All right, thank you. And these are great questions. So I know we have a lot of information. I'm trying to move through it appropriately, but you know, it's a lot. And so stop me if anything doesn't make sense. So moving to this third strategy that goes into the Metro District, the PIF, and then the Urban Renewal Plan. The Urban Renewal Plan would create, what we're proposing is to create a new plan area around the development. So as Jonathan mentioned, the existing CCARE plan does include certain areas of 4 Mile, but not all of it. And so that area would be modified. And then all of the area that we're talking about to be developed would be the new plan area. That will be able to generate tax increment financing for another 25 years after the time of approval. And that can help capture incremental property tax and incremental sales and lodging tax based on new development that occurs within the area. And that is what this map is depicting. This would be the boundary of the new plan area. And we're confident that this boundary in this area can be developed in the next 10 to 15 years. And so overall, here's the public finance strategy simplified in the graph. The metro districts collect property taxes. The add-on PIF collects the sales tax fees. And then this new urban renewal plan can collect the tax increment financing generated by new development, made feasible by the metro districts issuing the bonds to pay for the public infrastructure and improvements. And so that's kind of the flow of revenue. So now moving to the urban renewal plan and partnership. So that gave you an outline of the public finance strategy, our public infrastructure cost challenge. And so now I want to talk to you about why this area is eligible for urban renewal treatment, our projection of what this area could generate in terms of incremental property and sales taxes. And then ultimately we'll start talking about the impacts and the revenue sharing agreements. So just as a reminder, when you're starting a new urban renewal plan, you have to start with the condition survey assessment, the urban renewal plan document, the impact report that's for the taxing agencies. And then once that plan is approved, you start that 25-year tax increment financing clock. And there's three key documents that hold up that urban renewal plan. I have this goofy analogy of it being three legs of a stool, but it helps me remember it, so hopefully it helps you. So the urban renewal plan document that dictates the rules, what the plan can and can't do, and ultimately how it aligns with the Canyon City comprehensive plan. The condition survey tracks blighting factors within the area. Those blighting factors are detailed by state statute and defined by Colorado's urban renewal law, and I'll get into them in just a second. And then the impact report forecasts what this plan can generate in terms of property and sales tax revenue over 25 years. And so we're going to talk about the condition survey and the impact report today, because those are the critical documents about moving forward into the tax increment financing sharing agreements. First of all, a condition survey, it's not a traditional survey. We're not going out there, with equipment trying to figure out topography and things like that. A condition survey, and again, cheesy analogies, I'm a track fan, so bear with me, but it's all about clearing eligibility. And so in Colorado's urban renewal law, they define blight. And I know blight is a triggering term. When we think of blight, I think of where I grew up outside of Philadelphia. I know Colorado doesn't look like that, but in Colorado's urban renewal law, there are 11 factors of blight. And those 11 factors, when you look at an area for urban renewal, you need to find 4 or more of those factors for it to be eligible. So think about the area as being the pole vaulter, 4 or more factors is the pole vaulting bar, and I'm that lady sitting in that chair making sure that the bar doesn't fall. That's the condition survey. And keep in mind, when we talk about a condition survey, we're talking about an area and not property. There's sometimes situations where we have, Canyon City is an example. You have a very large existing urban renewal plan area. There are a number of properties, hundreds, if not thousands of properties within that plan area. Not every single property is blighted, but there are factors within that area that make it eligible for urban renewal treatment because those factors are arresting sound development from moving forward. And so if we just really quickly go through the 11 factors of blight, I think it's helpful. Apologies if this board already knows all of them, but if anyone's listening for the first time, they're like, what is this guy talking about when it comes to blight? This is how the state statute defines it. Factor 1 are slum, deteriorating, or deteriorating structures. Factor 2 is a predominance of a defective or an inadequate street layout. Factor 3 are faulty lots in relation to their size, adequacy, accessibility, or usefulness. Factor 4 is unsanitary or unsafe conditions. 5 is a deterioration of the site or other improvements. 6 is unusual topography or inadequate public improvements or utilities. 7 is defective or unusual conditions regarding the title. Factor 8 are existence of conditions that endanger life or property by fire or other causes. 9 are buildings that are unsafe or unhealthy to live or work in because of building code violations or a variety of defects. Factor 10 is environmental contamination of buildings or property. And Factor 11 has to do with the existence of health, safety, or welfare factors that would require a high level of municipal services or substantial physical underutilization or vacancy in the form of sites, buildings, other improvements in land. And so what should jump out at you with these factors, and I've done dozens of condition surveys around the state, is that while some factors are very much in line with what we would traditionally think of as blight, many of these factors operate in the public domain. And what you can see is that many of them have to do with infrastructure. When we talk about unsafe or unsanitary conditions, that actually an example of that would be a lack of water or sewer throughout an area. Factor 2 being in a predominance of defective or inadequate street layouts could be a lack of a street network throughout an area. Factor 11 has to do with vacancy. So if you have underutilized land, especially land that's been zoned for development, but it's completely unbuilt at this time, that would qualify for Factor 11. Factor 3, in terms of the faulty lot layouts, if lots are being non-used or they're not subdivided, that could trigger Factor 3. So all of these have to do with conditions that may be holding up development. And there is a final condition, I'm just going to gloss over that, but if a property owner is in unanimous agreement with the URA board that their property should be within an urban renewal area, you only need to find one of those factors. And so this is the area that was surveyed. Again, it's not the proposed plan area, it's larger than that. This is all of the 4-mile parcels in purple. And these colored dots that you see on the screen are the condition survey. And what you can see is that there were 7 factors that were identified throughout the 4-mile area. And again, many of these factors have to do with infrastructure, defective streets, faulty lots, the unsafe or unsanitary conditions that had to do with water and sewer, but also the 100-year floodplain runs along the bottom of the lot or the bottom of the 4-mile area. And so that's actually a flag for factor 4. Factor 5, site deterioration. There's trash and debris in certain areas throughout the vacant areas that were identified that trigger that factor. Topography and infrastructure, again, lack of water, lack of roads, lack of parking lots, lack of sewer. There were minor examples of environmental contamination south of County Road 123 with underground petroleum tanks. And then again, factor 11 being underutilization and vacancy. And so this is a list of those blighting factors right here, the 7. And because 7 factors were identified, that means that it exceeds the threshold of 4 factors, which makes this area eligible for urban renewal treatment. Number 2 is that the area be drawn as narrowly as possible. Now, I know this area is very large, and so you could argue about the final boundaries and how they should be drawn. And make no mistake, this meeting is not to determine the final boundaries. However, not all of 4 Mile is being suggested as part of a planned area, just the areas that infrastructure could realistically reach in the next 10 to 15 years to activate development. And so the condition survey found that the proposed plan area can be declared a blighted area and it qualifies for urban renewal treatment. I want to pause there before I jump to the impact report. Do we have any questions?
If I can add a comment on the blighted area. In our existing area, one of the first projects we had was Pharisee Ford. They came to us for a reimbursement agreement, and they were awarded the reimbursement agreement. When they were in the process of construction, they had a post-construction appraisal done of the property, and the value of the property was devalued by $1.2 million, I believe it was, for a term called external obsolescence. And that negatively impacted the property owners simply because the area the building was in was blighted. So that, yeah, I've never seen it happen like that before, but that was one of those keys that he contacted me and said, this is a real thing. Blighted areas devalue property in the area. So, and that's his location obviously is key to that eastern gateway commercial corridor into the area. So just wanted to share that as an example of the impact of blight on an existing development.
Could I ask a question? Am I allowed to ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I ain't got a vote to. There's a lot of stuff here. I've read this and I've been familiar with the 4 Mile since it was a ranch. But step 2 in the first 4 Mile plan is eligible. It says area, number 2, area drawn as narrowly as possible. Is that drawn or is that to be done later? Did I miss something?
No, it's. I'll show you a map, and then I can have Rick and Ryan and Jonathan explain. The area that is being projected, being proposed for the plan is what you see in yellow here.
Okay.
And that's gone through a few iterations since the beginning, and it really is the area, and we talked with Corey about it too, the area that has the most potential to draw or to develop the infrastructure that's needed for development. The areas that outside of that would be more of like the estate homes where,
There's
developers.
more area to that then. So it coincides with the purple map with all the dots on it.
The purple map,
Yeah.
I believe, was the entire.
Yeah, so when we did the condition survey, and this is a great question, sir. This is all of 4 Mile Ranch
Well, that's what
that
I
was
thought.
surveyed. And so ultimately, when you do a condition survey, you're going to look at the entirety of the area. And then your final plan boundary, you want to make that drawn as narrowly as possible to address the factors that were found in the condition survey.
Okay. Yeah, because I saw the purple. That looked like the whole ranch.
Yeah, that's not being proposed at this time. I want to reiterate that ultimately it's the determination of the board what the final legal description will be of this urban renewal plan boundary. We are suggesting that it looks like this, and that's what's in the impact report. However, if there is good reason to change that legal description or to exclude property, this board can ultimately suggest that, and the legal description does not have to be finalized until City Council approves the plan at their public hearing.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, ma'am.
So right now, currently, property taxes in 4 Mile are essentially double what they are in the rest of the community. By adding another metro district, is that going to increase them even further when we start putting in residential houses?
I don't believe so, and the reason for that is because, like I said earlier, Metropolitan District 1, which I'm sorry I don't have an image of for you, that is an existing metro district with a high mill levy. The reason why the service plan is being reconfigured is because of the PD having different uses throughout the area and trying to maintain flexibility. And so I would say that the tax burden that's currently being experienced in 4 Mile wouldn't change moving forward, but property within 4 Mile will have a higher tax burden than property outside of it. If that answers your question, ma'am.
Yes, thank you.
And then also very intentionally, and you can see in this map, or potentially see, is that we specifically excluded existing residential neighborhoods from this new URA so as to not impact those existing residents.
And those carve-outs, just as a one aside, those carve-outs are also Metropolitan District 1. I'm sorry, I know we're trying to talk about urban renewal plans, and I brought up the Metro District, so forgive me for that, but I wanted you to understand the full picture of the public finance strategy. I thought it was important for this discussion.
Well,
I
think
believe
for us to,
John has a hand.
I think for us to understand, I think we need to understand that metropolitan district to see the whole picture. I think that's a very good point that Commissioner Reeser brought up, is if additional taxes out there, that's going to be a burden to whoever buys out there. So anyway, just saying, I think it's a good idea to look at the big picture here.
Thank you, sir. And I believe Commissioner Hamrick had his hand up.
Yes, I do. I did briefly there. But before we move on to the actual urban renewal details, getting back to infrastructure a little bit, how does the project plan, or what is the method process used to bring in electrical service for the project? Thank you.
So that's a great question. And Jonathan and Byron, I may turn that over to you. I just want to be clear about the public funding strategy. That's a nuance with metropolitan district bonds, right? So, for example, metropolitan districts cannot fund dry utilities like electrical or gas. They can only fund public infrastructure, and dry utilities are typically, well, I'm getting into deep water because I'm not a lawyer, but you can't use the debt service on that. So dry electrical utilities, usually that cost is going to fall on the developer.
And then as far as electrical, bringing those two parcels, we're going to, for each parcel, we're going to go through the minor and or major subdivision process, application process. That starts to identify utilities, what is existing, what is needed, and where. And then in order to develop a specific parcel, a site plan application is needed that further details and identifies necessary electrical and other utilities. And at that time, I believe Black Hills and other utility providers are brought into the discussion to further coordinate with their services, what's needed, where, and how to get it there.
We got about 15 minutes left to run through this, and we actually have this on our other agenda for our other meeting. We can ask further questions at that time also, just to remind folks. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to try to be as efficient as possible here. So going through the urban renewal impact report. So just as a refresher, what is an impact report? An impact report is required by state statute if you're going to leverage tax increment financing within an urban renewal plan area. The report forecasts, and so again, we have a conceptual development. We take that conceptual development, we try to estimate its appraisals, we try to estimate how much activity could be in, say, the commercial areas. So we forecast revenue over 25 years. And the impact report, importantly, assumes 100% revenue share. That is not what's being asked. I want to be very clear about that. The impact report is meant to show the ceiling that over 25 years, how much revenue can this development generate? The tax revenue sharing agreements and the negotiations that come after that, obviously will be bringing that ceiling down to a level that can mitigate impacts. So just to be clear on that. And it quantifies impacts for all of the taxing districts, the city, the county, the school district, the special districts, and all of the other special, or all of the variety of districts that levy an ad valorem property tax within the area. And so the way that we estimate the property taxes is that we estimate taxable value by looking at the type of development. In Colorado, residential and commercial is assessed differently. Understanding the size of the development, how many units, the square footage of the commercial, the number of keys if a hotel is in there, the timing of the development, the absorption rate, and the value of the development. And so again, what the impact report forecasted was about 614 for sale residential units, 75 apartment units, 70,000 square feet of office space, and about 480,000 square feet of retail space. When we look at that, and again, it's conceptual, these numbers can change, but we figured this is going to give us a good barometer of what this development could generate over the next 25 years, $535 million of market value, $62 million taxable value. Here's just a quick charts, and if you looked at the impact report, they're explained in here, but this is our residential absorption, what we would be aiming for each year as this project comes online from 2025 to 2035. Commercial absorption, and how that will be absorbed from 2025 to 2040. And these are the various tax districts within the area and all of the different levies that those tax districts levy within the 4-mile area. So there are multiple tax districts like the school district, the city, the fire district, the county, the conservation districts, the water districts, and yet they have multiple different millage rates, right? The school district has their general fund and their bond redemption levy, their MLO. And so the impact report projects property taxes generated by this development for each of those entities at those various millage rates. We also look at the retail sales. The impact report focuses on that 3% city sales tax rate, even though it is 3.3% for the city, and then also looks at that 2.5% county sales tax rate for the new development that comes online. And this is the projection. What you can see here is the estimated base taxable value. So what this means is that in that I think it was Commissioner Troutman that's asked about the boundary. That yellow boundary, the existing taxable value of that yellow boundary is $419,000. If Jonathan and his team can achieve what they're trying to build over the next 10 to 15 years, that taxable value will go up to $62.8 million. And so the net is 62.3. That net is what's generating these property taxes. If we look at 25 years, it could generate up to $215 million in property and sales taxes. That's just looking at the city sales tax. If we discount that back to try to estimate what that revenue would be worth in today's dollars, which is also a way of estimating a bond, that's $67.8 million. And I think that's an important distinction that we want to make, because if we go back to the earlier chart, and I'll come back to this in a moment, we had about a gap of $30 million. This urban renewal plan could generate upwards of $68 million. So what that tells us is that this urban renewal plan could effectively close the gap when the developer is applying the metro districts in the PIF. And so we also looked at these impacts. We said, okay, given that if this development were to exist today and all those assumptions are held true, what is the impact on assessed value and revenues for all of these various tax districts? The impact report goes into impacts on infrastructure and also impacts on services. And we label things as a high level impact when it warrants a revenue sharing agreement with a specific district. What you see on this chart are the different tax districts: Fremont County, Canyon City Fire, Canyon City Rec, the two water conservation districts, County Conservation District, and the County Sanitation District, even though the Sanitation District doesn't levy a property tax mill in this area. And what you see here is anything that's in red is warranted as a high level impact, and our assessment is on the far right. And so the Canyon City School Districts would be a high level impact, Canyon City, high level impact, Fire District, high level impact, Rec District, high level impact, and the Conservation District, high level. You may say, well, why is the county a low level impact? And that's because no county sales tax is being proposed as being shared within this area. And the county sales tax far outweighs the property taxes generated. And so if this project would actually be a net positive to the county's budget, which is why we labeled it as low. But you can see all of these high level impacts. What does that mean? It means that we need to sit down and talk about a revenue sharing agreement, because at 100% revenue share, this is a significant amount of money, and it may have impacts on the budget and the services and the infrastructure of those tax districts. With that, I'm going to move into the TIF negotiations and next steps, because we only have 9 minutes. And so when we talk about feasibility and impact mitigation, this is the balancing act that is before us, before this board, before Rick and Ryan and all the other taxing entities. How can we know that the project can generate revenues in excess of the funding gap? The impact report also identified high-level impacts to a significant number of the taxing entities. So we know we need revenue sharing agreements to find a balance where the project becomes feasible without negatively impacting the partners. We have to find that balance, and that's what these TIF revenue sharing agreements are about. Going back to this chart, if we add in the urban renewal plan TIF revenues, again at 100% share, which is not being advocated for, but just to illustrate this, we get, all of a sudden the funding gap flips from negative 29 million to positive 37 million. What that tells me is that we have room to negotiate, and there's a viable path forward to funding this public infrastructure and making this project feasible. And so before plan approval, it's important to note that these TIF revenue sharing agreements have to be signed with every single partnering taxing entity. The impact report and the draft plan is sent to each taxing partner. Each CCARE partner negotiates a TIF revenue sharing agreement with, not the developer, but with the Urban Renewal Authority. It's the county negotiating an agreement with CCARE. It's the city negotiating an agreement with CCARE. There's a 120 period to negotiate that agreement. And once all of those TIF revenue sharing agreements are signed, then the plan can go to Planning Commission and then the City Council to ultimately approve it. There are steps to creating this plan. We have to approve the minor modification first. CCARE needs to accept the condition survey findings. Like I said, the impact report needs to be sent out, and we have to conduct those TIF revenue sharing agreements over a 120-day period. Then Planning Commission can recommend approval if the plan aligns with the comprehensive plan of the city, and then the City Council ultimately approves this proposed 4-mile urban renewal plan. And as a final takeaway, with another cheesy analogy from a movie, if you like The Wolf of Wall Street, the incremental property tax revenue does not exist. I can't stress this enough. Those incremental revenues do not exist. So when we're negotiating about this, we're negotiating future revenue that cannot exist unless this project moves forward. What does that mean? That it's future development. We're not negotiating any revenue that is already going to your budget. And when I mean your budget, I mean the county's budget, city's budget, school district's budget, fire district's budget. This is future revenue. We're trying to figure out how can we leverage the future revenue to ensure project feasibility. Again, we need to balance feasibility with the future impacts, and our goal is to make the plan successful without adversely impacting our partners. If we make this plan successful, we make the development successful, and in the process, to Rick's point earlier, we're able to catalyze economic impacts throughout the city, throughout the county. So the task before us is figuring out how we can do it in a way that's fair. And with that, I'll turn it over to the questions.
We got a couple minutes for questions, then we go into our other meeting, and then we can ask questions on that agenda. So if anybody has anything right now. I'm going to, real quick, because I got a couple minutes, I'm going to go back to that Metro District issue. It says here you have $15 million cap. Okay, worst case scenario, what happens? You have 680 new residential units, you sell 40, and this thing goes belly up. You got 40 units out there. Who's responsible for that $15 million Metro District bond? Is it this board? Is it the 40 residents? Is it the city of Kansas City? Who's responsible for that $15 million? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. The responsibility largely falls on the bondholder. So that's the risk, right? The risk is the person that bought that bond. And so what that means is if the Metro District doesn't perform, well, they're not coming to the doors of the residents asking for the money that live within there. They're not coming to the city because the Metro District is a separate governmental entity, and they're certainly not coming to CCARE. Even if you pledge tax increment financing revenues to the Metropolitan District, and this is again a way to structure these agreements, and you'd want to talk to Corey Hoffman about this more, but you would never want to structure an agreement where we would have what's called a moral obligation, right? Where the URA would have to pay if the Metro District defaults, or the city or the county would have to pay if the Metro District defaults. That's typically not how it's done. And so the risk was with the bondholder. And that might sound silly, but that's actually why they structure them in a certain way, and they set up a certain interest rate, and they set up capitalized interest. That's all goes into how they formed the bond in the first place. And so the person buying that bond assumes the risk.
So it's going to be the taxpayers, to be honest, right?
No, the taxpayers don't buy the bond. I mean, unless you want to buy it, it would be a big bond. But no, it's usually institutional investors that are buying the bond.
It's an investor. It's an outside third-party investor.
An outside investor is going to be responsible?
They are. They're the ones who are taking the risk and enjoy the benefit of the interest rate associated with the bond.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I have one quick question, if that's okay. I just wonder, how are you going to present this to the potential people who will be investing in the bond? Won't they want to see something from you about what the demand is, what your plans are, when you're going to first, first shovel hits the dirt? Is there, you have something that you're going to put together for that?
So at the same time we're presenting to you, we have a series of consultants that help us work with these bond investors. And so the discussions that are taking place with them is they have an interest in this project for a lot of the reasons that we described. It's really the only developable, sizable project for housing, really in Fremont County, certainly in Canyon City. Colorado's a good market, even though Canyon City is considered a tertiary market. The challenge with the bond investors now is they do want to see dirt moving. So what moves the needle with the bond investors is they want to see residential development. So we have the onesies and twosies in Metro District 1 now, and the rest of that is being built out as we speak. We're currently working with some commercial buyers who will put up commercial rooftops, but our goal with the catalyst projects that were kind of identified here in the first couple phases is to get some multifamily and single family houses out there. So turning dirt on those and putting up rooftops is what really moves the needle for those bond investors. And so that's why we're looking for these alternative sources in the capital stack. Is we know that the metro districts, and there's four, just to clear that up, one has issued debt, so they're out of the running in terms of providing capital for the rest of the project. But Metro Districts 2, 3, and 4 have a statutory capacity that they can borrow from bond investors. But the shortage that Andy identified here, we've got to shore that gap up. That's the request for TIF funding and such. But the bond investors for the Metro Districts, they want to see rooftops, just like we all do. And that could be a combination of multifamily, it can be workforce housing products, it can be some higher end stuff at some point. But that's the goal, is to, in 2026, hopefully, getting some rooftops built, selling some homes and getting some apartments up.
Okay, hours reached 5 o'clock. You need to switch over for the other meeting.
Andy,
All right.
you want to switch to
Thank
your
you.
other link?
Yep, I'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. We will adjourn this meeting.